Welcome everyone. So welcome to our Grand Challenge lecture. My name's Bronwyn Hartch. I'm the Executive Director for the Institute for Future Environment. So welcome to all of our audience, and also a shout out to our virtual audience as well. Ruth tells me that her mum might be watching through the live stream. So hello, Ruth's mum. If you're on the live stream there. But it'll be recorded for her specially too, Ruth, so that's cool. She's in the UK.
No, she's in Brisbane.
Oh, is she? Oh, well, there you go. So welcome, everybody. And also you can see that we've got, going through here, a special Twitter hashtag for the GCL, so hashtag Ife Gcl. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and where QUT now stands, pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait people continue to play within the QUT community. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Ruth Bridgestock to you all. Ruth is a member of QUT's Creative Industries faculty and is passionate about developing the future, particularly our future capable learners, our teachers, programs and educational institutions in general. Her activities have centred on answering the questions of how universities in particular can boost their capability to participate in the 21st century in the knowledge economy and in society as a critical fabric in society. Ruth is also an Australian National Senior Teaching Fellow for Graduate Employability 2.0. And what that initiative is trying to do is build learners, build their connectedness and capabilities for success in life and work in the 21st century, and strengthen the capacity of higher education to cultivate meaningful connections and partnerships with industry, community and key stakeholders in the education endeavour. So please join with me in welcoming Ruth.
Thank you so much, Bronwyn. And thank you to the Institute for Future Environments for hosting me in my Grand Challenge lecture today. We're just going to set ourselves up, and I am ready to go. So, I think it's kind of appropriate that this is a Grand Challenge lecture, and it's entitled that, because really, when I think about it, my work is all about grand challenges. It's about the grand challenges that we face as individuals, as lifelong and life-wide learners, as educators, as people who are running businesses and organisations, in this very disrupted kind of world in which we live. So what I've been doing in the last, and I've been reflecting on this, 16 years, I've been asking questions in this kind of space. I do research into the world of work, successful and less successful individuals and organisations. I investigate social problems and the kinds of capabilities that individuals need to navigate and to survive and thrive in those sorts of environments. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start by sharing with you some of the big challenges that we seem to be facing. Now, most of you will probably be familiar to some extent with this stuff already, but I think it's worthwhile to cover off on it again as sort of a way to segue into, what are the capabilities that we need going forward, and how are we going to learn those? These are the big questions. And at the end, I'm going to give you a couple of takeaways that we can all engage with in order to become more future capable. So how does that sound? Good? Let's do it. All right. So my starting point is this. I'm really interested in why, what the results are, what the effects are of things like digital disruption. So things like that automation, massive increases in processing power, cloud computing, this sort of networked economy in which we all live now. Everybody's on Facebook, right? Things like globalization as a result of that, and the big social challenges and trends that we're facing right now. I'm going to start off, I think, in maybe a slightly pessimistic place. But bear with me because there's hope, and we're going to get there towards the middle and end of my grand challenge lecture. So let's start with this. Super wicked problems. So it's 2017, and you may have heard of wicked problems before, but that idea has been around since the 1970s, Horst Rittel et al., talking about these sort of social issues that are very difficult to manage. It's difficult to know who's responsible for them, and they're not straightforward sorts of solutions. So wicked problems. But no, it's 2017, and so now we've upgraded, and it's super wicked problems, super ultra wicked problems. So what are these? These are things like climate change. These are wicked problems where also it's very easy to kind of have this sort of irrational, let's put off solving this until later on. These kinds of ideas. So we're not quite sure who's responsible for this stuff. There's no clear sort of oversight globally. We all seem to be responsible for this in some way, but there's this real diffusion of responsibility. Plus, it's a very complex sort of problem. I mean, other examples include things like asylum seekers and refugees. You know that there are 22 million of them in the world at the moment. I mean, that's nearly as many people as there are in Australia right now. Yeah. And there are things like this. Plastic in our oceans. Now let me give you these statistics. I want to get them right. So we've got gyres. What they call these sort of almost icebergs, except they're not icebergs. They're bergs of plastic. There are 5 of them in the world at the moment, in different oceans. There are 269,000 tonnes floating around, and 4 billion plastic microfibres distributed further in deep seas. Now, this is a big issue. It's not just about the wildlife. It's not just about the ecology, which is also very important. It's increasingly about chemical contamination of our food chain. Effectively, we're poisoning ourselves through our addiction to plastic. These are the gyres. The biggest one, North Pacific, I mean, these are the size of continents. It's an epic kind of problem that we're having here. 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic debris in the ocean. This is serious. But 5.25 trillion is what? It's that, with all those zeros. I don't know about you, but I have trouble conceptualising how many zeros that is or how big that is. And I think that's part of the issue with many of these super wicked problems. Because it's so big and it seems so distant. And it seems like, well, what can I possibly do? 525000000. Yes, I've lost my place. And when you look at that, it seems sort of fairly innocuous, really. We use these all the time. This is one example of a super wicked problem. I'm going to come back to this later. So, super wicked problems. The other thing that I'm really interested in is the changing world of work. Uberization. Okay, so that's not a word. But you know what I mean, right? Yeah, it's this sort of whole changing world of work, the gig economy. The fact that we are all increasingly precarious in our careers. We're juggling different forms of employment all at once. 20% of OECD-based employment is less than 1 year in length, and 33% is less than 3 years in length. We have the rise of Upwork and Airtasker in Australia with those hideous ads. And yeah, we're all increasingly affected by, directly, the gig economy and the self-managed career. I'm really interested in this kind of stuff. Have you heard that the robots are coming for our jobs? I'm sure you have. This has been a huge theme in popular media in the last few years, starting with the Oxford researchers Frey and Osborne in 2013, who did a big study of the likelihood of automation of current occupations. Using the big ONET database in the United States. And they found 47% of jobs are likely to be automated in the next 5 to 10 years. That's quite a lot. Then CEDA, the Committee for Economic Development of Australia, replicated that study in Australia. And it turned out, hey, it's not so bad, it's only 43% here. So yeah, I mean, people are worried about this. And understandably. However, what this sort of popular media doesn't mention is the fact that new jobs are being created. But it's really difficult to measure those jobs that are being created. We don't have existing statistical classifications for them in ANSCO. They just sort of slip through and end up in existing categories. So things like information security and social networks, these sort of very digital, new, emerging type roles are becoming more and more dominant. So all is not lost. And I would argue that all is not lost anyway. I'll explain why in a moment. So what are the jobs that are likely to be safe? That's a big question that everybody is asking. So if we've got automation, artificial intelligence, what's going to be left for human beings? The first category is social interaction and emotional intelligence. And yes, I've included some fairly facetious-looking slides here, starting with this one. So yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you're in a caring role, if you're in a role that requires persuasion, empathy, understanding what the other person is thinking, what's going on for them, and then coming up with an emotional response, I mean, that's a fairly complex kind of activity that humans are very good at, and robots are less likely to be good at least in the next 5 to 10 years. So these sorts of roles seem to be a little bit safer. Second one, yes, this is facetious as well, is complex mobility and manual dexterity. So I'm not here talking about robotic vacuum cleaner and so on. I mean, they're not particularly good at this point anyway. But I'm talking here about things like surgery is not likely to become incredibly fully automated in the next 5 to 10 years. We'll still have robot-assisted surgery, but it still requires the surgeon to navigate the unstructured space and make very fine decisions and then act in very fine-grained sorts of ways. Robots are not very good at this. Here's an example, meet Brett. He's the Berkeley robot for the elimination of tedious tasks. And it took Berkeley researchers 7 years to develop him. He actually learns complex manual tasks. So things like screwing lids on jars, he can do that. And he's folding a towel in this shot. The downside of Brett is that it takes him 20 minutes each time to learn how to do his folding of a towel. 20 minutes to learn how to fold a towel? Yeah, I don't think that the robots are going to be replacing us doing that sort of thing anytime particularly soon. Bye, Brett. And the third one, the last bastion of human activity really, is creativity and innovation. And I'm not just talking about artists here. I'm talking about what physicists do, what learned professionals do all over the place, and what artists do. And that is think inductively and combine different sorts of knowledge sets in interesting ways to come up with solutions to problems, or even identify problems, challenges, possibilities in the first place. That won't be a surprise to you, this last one. So yeah, here's an interesting graph from Frey and Osborne. Well, it's a chart, really. So you can see here at the bottom, yay, telemarketers, they're gone. Unfortunately, they're being replaced by more insidious forms of online marketing that are very targeted to you and your online behaviour and your interests. So watch for that. At the other end, you can see that Zumba instructors are fine. So recreational therapists, makes sense. You know, they're moving in unstructured space. It's a fairly fairly emotionally intelligent kind of role as well, one might argue. If there are any teachers in the room, our likelihood of automation is about 0.07 to 0.08. So this means some jobs within teaching will be automated, but the vast majority won't be. But what they will be, and what all of our jobs will be, is transformed. So when you think about the job that you were doing even 2 or 3 years ago, it's very, very different to, if you're doing the same job, what you're doing now. We're becoming a much more digitally enabled, far more networked kind of society and economy in general. And this requires different sorts of jobs, different sorts of skills. So, is this going to be happening in the future? Is it far off and distant? Are we talking like it'll happen at 10 years or at 5 years? Well, actually, it's happening already. So you can see here, this is ABS data. Your routine manual, routine cognitive skill type jobs are on the decline, and the non-routine ones are increasing. Let me give you a more concrete example. Printery workers and graphic designers. So printery workers are the people who were responsible for the printing, the publishing, the typesetting, all of that sort of manual type stuff to do with the publishing industry. And graphic designers, they do the creative stuff, often digitally enabled, web, print, mobile, and so on. You know what they do. So you can see here, this is in action. Your graphic designers are working digitally, often very agilely. They can self-publish. They don't have to resort to printing presses and so on anymore. And printers, graphic press workers. Now, what's worrying about this graph is that it's not that the printery workers are now becoming graphic designers. That's not what's happening. What's happening is the printery workers are out of jobs and other people are becoming graphic designers. So we've got a whole bunch of people who were involved in, particularly in the career industry, what we call realistic type jobs, manual type jobs, people who have in their roles, they've ended up with a lot of routine sorts of tasks. They're out of work. And economists are really divided about what's going to happen to those people. And that's another example of a super wicked problem. We don't know what the answer to that is. The good news for the higher educators in this room is that higher education is going to continue to be important. What argument do I have to support that? Well, apart from the theoretical one that higher education supports and fosters very high-level professional sorts of skills. So high-level complex analysis, high-level disciplinary sorts of skills, high-level creativity, the emotional intelligence sorts of stuff that we were talking about just before. But here's some other evidence. So what we've got here in this lovely graph is we have the percentage of the workforce with higher education in particular roles, and we have the likelihood of automation along the bottom here. So let me share with you this one, this outlier up here. Guess what that is? Which occupation? Yes, absolutely, Karen. It's accountants. So, quite likely to be automated, and yet they require higher education, the vast majority of them. Any accountants in the room? I wouldn't necessarily start panicking right now. I actually believe that accountancy is here to stay, but I think that the role is going to be significantly transformed. So you're going to end up with a lot of automation of the stuff that you do already, and you're going to end up doing very high-level, complex analysis, consultancy type work with people, and creative work. So creative accountants. But not that type. Okay, so higher education is going to be really important. And yet, I would argue that we need to change both what and how we are teaching. And I'm going to present some arguments for this now. I actually think it's really critical for higher education to transform itself, because I'm actually worried that we're not going to survive what's ahead and what is already happening in our current form anyway. So right, let's start here. When I went to uni, this was very much my experience. Pedagogy is changing, so learning and teaching approaches are changing, but still this is the dominant mode in higher education. So people come along to lectures, they receive pre-digested content from an expert out the front, and then at a later appointed stage, individually, they regurgitate it. There it is, see, I've got the knowledge and the skills. And then they move on. And probably by the next unit, the next subject, they've forgotten all of that stuff from the previous one. And definitely, by the time that they've graduated and they've started applying that knowledge and those skills in the world of work, this stuff is going to be kind of fuzzy, at best. At best. So I'm quite critical of this sort of thing. I do think that there is a place for lectures. Ask me afterwards what I think it is. But yes, I think that we need to move away from this being the dominant approach. And in so doing, I'm going to draw upon some research that I did a couple of years back with digital media professionals. I wanted to ask them, first of all, what do you think about higher education? What are your experiences of higher education? And second of all, how do you prefer to learn? So in the workplace and also for your initial education and training, what sort of learning and teaching approaches would you prefer? Digital media people, what do I mean by this? I'm talking about people who are in multimedia, games, apps development, sort of these digital cutting edge sorts of fields. Why was I interested in them? Because arguably they're there in very fast moving fields. They're there needing to keep up with industry changes in ways that aren't necessarily being met by formal education. Because, let's face it, courses are not able to be written fast enough for them to be able to take advantage of it in the vast majority of cases. So a lot of their learning needs to be informal. And looking at the trends in the way that all industries are going, we're all increasingly in this situation where the life cycle of skills in roles is becoming shorter and shorter. We've got to find another way to learn. Okay, so before I get into their preferred learning strategies, I will just mention very briefly that they didn't pull any punches when it came to their university experiences. The big response here was, well, yeah, you know, a degree is probably a good thing. It's good to use as an initial screening tool. Of course, there is there's a certain validity in employing certain digital people who've dropped out of university. There is that kind of, it's the Google kind of phenomenon. But by and large, yeah, university degrees are a good initial sorter. Would I employ somebody who'd done digital media at university? Well, actually, probably not so much. I said, why? Why? They're like, well, because they don't know how to learn. They don't know how to learn. I'd much rather, and this is from a few of them, I'd much rather employ a humanities graduate or somebody with broad-based sorts of experience at university, because they know how to self-manage their learning, and that's so important in these industries. So, what do they prefer? They prefer this. Hands-on, experiential, situated learning. Talking like, you know, working on a problem by yourself or in a small group, collaborating on something. And when you think about it, we all do this all the time. And in fact, for most of it, it's our preferred dominant learning strategy. sort of hands-on, problem-solving, hang on, let me give it a go, and then if it's not working, I can investigate that, or I can ask somebody, or I can read the manual. I mean, if you've had a mobile phone recently, a new mobile phone, does anybody start by reading the book of words that comes with it? No, I didn't think so. I don't. I just, yeah, right, give it a go, give it a go. And then I might go online if something's not working. So yeah, situated learning experiences. The second thing is about communities of practice. And again, I'm pretty sure that this will have resonance with all of you. Communities of practice are typically your 6 to 12 close ties. So the people that you work with all the time, they might be colleagues, they might be friends, they might be just sort of people who are, that you hang out with. They're the people that you sort of stick your head around the cubicle and go, hey, I'm having a problem with can you just help me with, yeah. Or they're the people that you have coffee with. These communities of practice are extraordinarily important because you rely on one another all the time. You provide them with support and with your knowledge and skills and vice versa. Are you all thinking of your 6 to 12 people? Yeah. Right, but this is where I would argue that higher education really falls down. This broader thing. Distributed learning network is what I call it. And that is that much broader network that these digital media professionals had. These people who were online, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on industry fora. They were users, professionals, they were maybe students in those fields, anybody who was interested. And you sort of add them, and then you follow them. And if they come up with something interesting on a particular day, you might retweet that, or reshare that, or you might use that, or you might investigate that further. And again, it's about reciprocity, but in a far more distributed and arguably passive way. So much less work in maintaining a distributed knowledge network of lots and lots of people. But it's good because they're there if you need them. And it's good because there's this continuous feed of stuff, information that's been pre-filtered for you, that you can then make sense of and use, if you like. Higher education doesn't do this particularly well. I did some industry and higher education interviews as part of my National Senior Teaching Fellowship last year. Huge metaphors came through. The first one was silos, and the second one was university as walled garden. So we keep our students, our curriculum, our teachers, our learning experiences on the inside of the wall, and life happens on the outside. And we let our students out only on a very limited basis. We're very, very risk averse, and I think to our detriment in universities, because we need to be building these big networks from scratch, because this is how people prefer to learn. And you know it, because you do it too. You might not be on Twitter, or you might not be using Facebook for professional purposes, but you have that wider network of people. So if you need the person who has the programming skills, or you need the person who's going to help you with your mobile phone, or you need somebody who's going to write some advertising copy when you decide that you're going to start a small business, you know where to find them. Or you know somebody who knows somebody. Yeah. Okay. So, Ruth being very opinionated. And I just wanted to go back to this picture because it is just so darn different. Yeah. Wow. There's a big opportunity here for education. Okay, so that's the learning and teaching approaches side of things. The big question I now have is, which actual capabilities do we need? I mean, is it okay to just renovate how we teach, or do we need special skills in order to be able to cope with the super wicked problems, manage the super wicked problems, and manage the fact that our jobs are going to be disappearing and reappearing, and we're going to have to reinvent ourselves constantly? You know the answer to this already. Here's a big long list. Lots and lots of publications have been publishing these laundry lists of skills and capabilities for the 21st century, for the future workforce, and so on, for the last few years, probably since about 2010. This is my agglomeration of them, with a bit of an emphasis on the ones that I've particularly explored myself. Some of you are taking photos, and that's lovely. However, I'm going to encourage us to move away from this kind of approach, because I tell you what, we've got lists of skills and capabilities coming out of everywhere at this point. We've got disciplinary skills, we've got generic and transferable skills, we've got 21st century skills, we've got metacognitive skills. Oh my gosh, you know, it's overwhelming. And what's an individual to do, let alone what is a teacher to do? Instead, I'm going to give you some broad kinds of approaches and strategies that will engender those kinds of skills. And in so doing, I'm going to draw upon my study of outstandingly successful people, Australians. They were creative industries professionals, so art, media and design, and also STEM professionals. These were all mid-career kinds of people. The big questions that I wanted, they were my usual sorts of questions to answer, were what are your reflections on higher education? What sort of skills and capabilities do you have? How did you learn those? And what else is distinctive about you? You outstandingly successful person, you. And so I followed these people for a year. They were very generous, and I was very annoying, because I kept on interviewing them, and I talked to all of their close colleagues, their friends. We did social network mapping. I had a look in their calendars. I attended meetings. There were 23 of them. It was a great year. I loved this. And I should say, these are their disciplines. These are the creative industries ones. So quite diverse. And here are the STEM ones. Outstandingly successful people. They were nationally and internationally recognised by their peers through prizes, through big grants, through patents, these sorts of things. It was different by each industry. That's the big finding. But before I go into that, I'm going to share with you very briefly some things that I haven't published on with respect to this, because there are lots of different capabilities that they had in common, and there are also some things that you can't learn. So for instance, if you want to be an outstandingly successful innovator, it helps if you are slightly taller than average, not too tall, yeah. Also if you are fairly good looking. I'm not talking here about supermodel status, I'm talking, fairly good looking. And it also helps if you have a long-suffering partner who is prepared to support you during the early years while you're working through the vicissitudes of multiple failures and learning from failure, the instructive consequences of, oh, that hasn't worked, okay, rebound, try something else. So yeah, there's just a little segue for you, but as I say, here's the big finding. It's a big finding. They had very interesting educational backgrounds, these people. It wasn't just a single discipline and lots and lots and lots of depth. It was transdisciplinary. They had backgrounds in very diverse areas. So you can see here sort of visual communication and mathematics, theatre making and microbiology. So it wasn't necessarily a degree in each thing, but there was certainly a lot of informal learning or some background learning or a postgraduate qualification perhaps in quite a disparate field. This was a key thing. So why is this a key thing? They had such disparate backgrounds. First of all, because it afforded them different perspectives than their unidisciplinary peers on disciplinary problems. They were able to bring a different perspective to the kinds of problems that were being faced. They were also able to brand themselves quite differently. So yes, I've got these special skills. I have a unique perspective. And in an employment market that is as competitive as we know that it is at the moment, this is a key thing. The other thing was that it permitted them to link with people very dissimilar to themselves in order to come up with ideas and solutions to problems. Oh yeah, here's another study I found that will support my will support my findings. It's a correlational study, so it could be something else. But anyway, this study is great. It maps Nobel laureates' likelihood of engagement with artistic practice. So what it says, briefly, is that Nobel laureates are 2.8 times more likely than your average common or garden scientist in America to have an artistic hobby. So this could be taken as support for my argument around disciplinary agility. Or it could be something else entirely. We don't know. But anyway, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? It's an interesting thing. So yeah. You know about the T-shaped person, yeah? Popular management kind of idea. And it's been used to critique higher education for some time. So the argument is that, typically we'll turn out I-shaped graduates. So graduates who have depth in one particular disciplinary area, and that's it. And send them out the door. And the response has been to engender T-shapedness. What is T-shapedness? It's, yes, you've got the disciplinary depth to some extent, and then you've got a range of generic capabilities, transferable skills. So I'm talking here oral communication, written communication, numeracy, digital literacy, these kinds of things that allow you to adapt to different kinds of employment circumstances. And these generic skills or transferable skills support you to work in different kinds of areas beyond your I-shaped discipline. So this has been the conventional argument. And there's certainly some support for this empirically. However, drawing upon my Creating Innovators study, I would actually argue for a different model that's more effective than this type of thing. And I'm talking here about your T-shaped graduate. I'm talking about the graduate that has the disciplinary depth, and they may have some background in something else. They studied something in high school that they really loved. They're learning to code. They're doing a MOOC on something. They're also learning how to play guitar. They're dabbling in a space. And every different educational experience, every different discipline that you experience increases your ability to work with others outside your discipline, to tap into their knowledge regimes and to be able to translate what they care about and what's going on for them into meaningful practice. Yeah. So, if you are a great hobbyist and you dabble in lots of things, this is great news for you. For the rest of you, if you have that secret hankering to, take up guitar again, now's your time. Now's your time. Okay, and so this extends to the social networks of those people. When I had a look at the social networks of the outstandingly successful innovators in STEM and creative industries, their social networks were really, really interesting. Usually we hang out with people who are very similar to ourselves. It's called homophily. We tend to hang out with people with similar disciplinary background, similar political beliefs, and socioeconomic status, culture, all of that type of thing, because we don't like conflict. Human beings are really not good with conflict. However, these people went out of their way to engage with people who were completely outside their field and fields of experience. And digging into that, I learned that it was because they were intensely curious. They wanted to tap into what was going on in different disciplines. Like, what were the disciplinary challenges going on in aeronautical engineering at the time? And how can I tap into that? And also, because we know now from lots of empirical studies, and these guys knew it intuitively, that when you have people who come from different disciplinary areas, different perspectives, and they start working together in certain ways, new knowledge is formed. This is innovation in practice. So you have a group of people coming from different disciplines come together to solve a problem. Woo, there we go. New knowledge is formed. It's extraordinarily powerful. But homophily is still important. Why? Because once you've had that great new idea and you're solving the problem, or that innovation, that new product or service is right there, then you need to take it back to a group of people who are going to bring this to fruition. They become a powerhouse of people who are going to bring it through to market, to an audience, and so on. The third bit is your weak and indirect ties. I'm just going to pause there for a micro moment and go, hey, doesn't that look a lot like the preferred learning strategies of the digital media people in my previous example? Yeah. So weak ties are extraordinarily important here too. And why is that? It's because if you've got a project going on and you need a Perl programmer or you need an oboe player, you know somebody who knows somebody, or you know somebody online vaguely, and you can turn them into a strong tie and then start working with them in this multidisciplinary kind of way. So you see, weak ties are so extraordinarily important to us here in the 21st century. How am I going for time? All right, excellent. So now we've got a range of concrete examples of this, because I've been talking quite sort of up in the air and abstractly about things. And now I'm going to give you a couple of examples of where this is actually happening or has happened. Has anybody played Fold It? Yes, we have some Fold It people in the audience. Usually everybody just sits there going, okay. So Fold It, it's a great online, massive multiplayer puzzle game. And its background is, it's all about protein folding, which is actually, you know, really quite a specialised kind of field in microbiology. And the reason that this is important is that in 2010, at the University of Washington, biochemists had been trying to solve a particular problem for about a decade. This particular problem was the structure of a protein that was integral to a monkey virus, the Mason Fitzer, that was very, very similar to human HIV. If there are any microbiologists in the audience, I apologise for my really terrible science explanation here. I'm not a scientist. But anyway, we'll get through. So they've been churning through computing power. They'd used up all of their computing power. All of the big machines at the University of Washington were trying to solve this problem. And they'd had no success. Thankfully, just in the next building, they had the Centre for Games Development. And one of the guys in the, and I'm using non-gender specific here, guys, in the biochemist group knew the people in the gaming group. And they're also aware of the trend towards crowdsourcing. So they got together and they went, actually, we could crowdsource this solution, create this game, get hundreds of thousands of people working on this problem in a fun way, co-opetition, form teams, protein fold, find the most parsimonious solution. You know, it might only take a few months. It'd be great. So they did it. They put this online. You can still play it today. Fold It. And the gamers, about 10,000 of them, solved this particular problem in 10 days. Yeah. And then they published it in Nature with all of the scientists and all of the gamers working together. So the name. It's really, really, really exciting stuff. So it's a great example of transdisciplinarity, disciplinary agility, and the role of networks in what we do in solving problems. Here's another very brief example. You can check this one out online. Innocentive. Which is actually a for-profit company in the United States. And what they do is they crowdsource high-level scientific and technical solutions to things. So NASA use them all the time. And they run challenges. There are about 375,000 participants. Many of these people have PhDs, but many do not. And they come from a really wide variety of backgrounds. So I'll give you an example. Whoop. Here's the NASA one about solar flares in 2015. So the issue that NASA had was that solar flares were happening unpredictably, and they weren't able to tell when they were going to happen, how intense they were going to happen, and when they were going to go away. And this is hugely a problem for astronauts, because radiation kills humans, and for their hardware, because radiation kills hardware. And they had no way of doing this, of sorting this out. And so they put up a challenge on InnoCentive, $30,000 to the best solution. Send it out there, see what happens. Here's the guy who won. He's not a physicist. He's not even a data analyst. He's a retired radio frequency engineer. And he had a great solution. Dramatically improved accuracy and time window of predictions, prediction capability of up to 8 hours with 85% accuracy. Legend for a retired radio frequency engineer from New Hampshire. Yeah, so there we go. There's another example. Crowdsourcing the solution. Oh, and there's this that they published as well. Having expertise unrelated to the problem improves chances of success. Well, I knew I was right. Okay, so take-home messages here. For everybody, for educators, for individuals, for organisations. Becoming more future capable. 1, find ways to make our shared challenges more real and immediate. So, yes, plastic bags are a problem, but they're not a problem over there somewhere else. They're actually a problem here, and they are affecting us. We're just not really aware of the links. So we need to make that very immediate. Foster hands-on, minds-on research, real-world learning and problem solving. So that preferred way of learning that we do all the time anyway. But let's reinforce that. Let's really expand that. Become more key-shaped. Yes, do that MOOC. Take up that guitar again. It's going to be useful for something. And connect with others. So value your networks, grow your networks, learn together. Yeah. Build that LinkedIn profile. Try Twitter, maybe. And as a coder, if you're still worried, you're worried about the plastic bag situation. I am too, it's pretty dismal. There is hope. There is hope. And it's in the form of a 19-year-old aerospace engineering student. He's Dutch, Boyan Slat, who came up with an idea for a passive array that drifts around in the oceans and collects and filters plastics. He came up with this idea as an undergraduate student, and then he dropped out of aerospace engineering because, let's face it, it wasn't that relevant to what he was doing. And since then, he's crowdsourced millions of dollars. He's also crowdsourced a lot of expertise from engineers and from scientists. They have a prototype that is currently in the North Sea. And they're giving it a go. They are giving it a go, and absolutely right on. You can check out where they're going at theoceancleanup.com. So thank you very much for coming on and listening today.
Fantastic stuff, thanks Ruth. So over to the audience now for any questions that you have for Ruth. And we'll have some microphones roving around, so make sure you put those hands up high. I've got a question to get us going, Ruth. Yep. So you spoke about implications for higher education around learning and teaching. What do you think it means for the research part of what higher education institutions do?
Oh yeah, okay, right. So first of all, we've started to put policies in place where we're encouraging interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. I think that we need to go far further in that direction. Mm-hmm. So at the moment we've got fairly mixed national policies around, yes, tick on your ARC grant application if your team is interdisciplinary. But at the same time, we're still expected to really push for a single field of research code. So there's mixed messages going on, and I think it's risk aversion, there's habit there, but I think, we really need to push for transdisciplinary research. Mm-hmm. I also think that, again, it's about increasing our porosity as research institutes, as institutions. So really engaging with the public far more on questions of national and international relevance, crowdsourcing the solutions, working actively with members of the community to solve problems. I think that's really exciting, and it's also an optimal way of doing things.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, there's two down here. Yep. Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks, Ruth. It's good with universities. I think it should also start kindergarten and primary school so that it's just a normal part. We're normalising it rather than making it special.
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly important to have that continuity there, and we need to start right from the beginning. Right from early educational experiences and provide consistent messages in what we do. So it's a terrible shock for students who sort of have just finished their year 12, they've come from a high stakes performative exam-based environment, they've had to get an OP, and they've had to get it right. And do all the regurgitation of knowledge, etc. And then all of a sudden to get to a university environment where we go, it's okay, we can co-determine our problems, and let's crowdsource the solution. It's quite nebulous, and I'm unsurprised that students feel quite anxious because they don't have the roadmap for that. So ideally we'd start, right in early childhood educational experiences. Yeah.
Tim, have you got one over your side there? I'll move around the room over this lady here.
Yeah. You mentioned the word anxious.
Yeah.
That is a problem in students. They're anxious not just for exams, but they have anxiety and many panic attacks, and sometimes a hidden thing. And it obviously has to be addressed through how they live their lives. And university, it's success, whatever that success, how it's measured. I'm a psychologist and counsellor.
I am too.
At the university, okay. For 16 years, I was a high school physical education teacher. Mm-hmm. So I bring a lot of that into the work that I do. Some of them have forgotten or haven't learned how to play. Yeah. The work ethic is there, yes, the work ethic, but where's the play ethic?
Yeah.
I have a big bag of tennis balls, all this, and I chuck them at them. They've got to sort of, wake up. And if they're depressed, it certainly gets them moving. So I'm just thinking that part of this has to incorporate enjoyment, fun, laughter, the rest. I ran some brain gym boot camps, okay?
Yep.
A brain gym boot camp. So it was a group of people, okay, they had to do the intellectual thing in the middle with the tables, pencil and paper, whatever, in the middle, and then go off and do 3 minutes of a physical thing, whatever that happened to be. It could be, skipping or whatever. So we had all that. Now, they could do the intellectual stuff, but they couldn't aim, they couldn't catch a ball, they were uncoordinated, basically, in my view.
Yeah.
They're probably quite normal, really, but, they found the physical tasks hard. So I only ran 2 of those. Because some of them said, test me, what's wrong with me? I can't do this hula hoop or whatever. I mean, not everybody can do hula hoop. So I think that part of this is super, it's excellent, but I think we haven't to forget the human being and the happiness and the fun and enjoyment that has to be part of life.
I am completely with you. I will add a couple of extra things. I completely agree about play. Play is often where the best ideas come from as well. But But also, I mean, to some extent, uncertainty does breed anxiety. I mean, we're human beings. We like things to be certain, just like we don't like conflict very much. So the question is, how do we manage the anxiety of uncertainty? And I think the first thing is to normalise it, and to say, it's okay that things are uncertain, and to build the coping response, the strengths-based approach of, and I'm going to be okay. I'm going to make the most of this uncertainty. I can do this. I've done this before. I can do it again. And the other element, I think, is about social support, and building a community of people who aren't just about learning and ideas, but they're also about supporting you and you supporting them. I think that as we've become far more sort of individual in everything that we do, just as we've become disconnected in terms of learning and coming up with new ideas, we've become disconnected from our communities in terms of that social and community support. And I'm hoping that when artificial intelligence and the robots come to take our jobs, it will have an opportunity to really reconnect with what's meaningful. That we'll be able to build communities and engage in making together, these sorts of things. This is my dream for the future of humanity.
So I think there's a question here at the front, Cindy, and then we'll go to the fellow with the white shirt.
Thanks for the presentation. In your world of the future of work, how significant is experience in multicultural environments and outside a long-distant island like Australia?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. I didn't mention it here, but I hope it was implied, that just as disciplinary agility is really important, cultural agility is equally important. So it becomes about being able to navigate multiple perspectives, to have empathy for multiple perspectives. I mean, this is the way to solve our global problems, is through having experiences of people who come from completely different backgrounds to ourselves. So yes, absolutely. And in our undergraduate programs, I really encourage my creative industry students to go and have an overseas experience if they haven't had one already, because it's just so enriching for them. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. I work for an engineering company. I have for 25 years, so I've got the deep disciplinary experience. I'm also a father of 2 young children, so you've talked very much about the 5 and 10 years ahead. I'm very interested in a 15 and 20-year horizon, if you have any views on that, any viewpoints, specifically with the paradox I see developing between how do you get deep experience through having a long, sustained career, more than 10 years, and yet still migrate through lots of different experiences. I certainly endorse everything you're saying. I'm just wondering how that will play out in 20 years' time when maybe engineering houses that I've sort of worked in perhaps don't exist in the same form. And this ties in with I don't want to answer your question or anything, I'm just also trying to work out the paradox of, well, how do you actually fund the whole thing? Does society just stop funding itself and fall down? Because crowdsourcing $20,000 to one person who's retired, and the thousands of people who would have contributed time and effort to that is less than a cent an hour for the combined effort. So it's like, could you sort of see where you see society morphing to beyond 10, 20 years? I want to know for my kids.
Okay, now we're in very, very uncertain territories. I mean, when I read the economics literature in this space, I mean, economists are fairly, they're risk-averse sorts of people, and so they're prepared to make predictions maybe 5 to 10 years out, but even then they're a bit divided. And then once we get beyond that, we're in the great unknown. So I think if anything, yes, the move towards specialisation will keep increasing. And I also think that this sort of the disciplinary agility type stuff will also keep increasing, and there will be a tension. It's like those of us who are employed, what sort of skills and capabilities individually will we need in that space? How do we get that depth if we're also being challenged to... And I think part of the answer is networks. It is about... if I don't have these capabilities, then I can draw upon the people who I know do have that deep disciplinary expertise. I've done some studies, some organisational studies about current day public service organisations where they do have I-shaped people, so deep disciplinary depth. They've got some of them, but they make sure that they surround them with key-shaped people. So their particular knowledge is drawn out and optimised. So I think we'll see those sorts of, sort of like a jigsaw of human people, of human and artificial intelligence. Good save, Ruth. And in terms of, given that few of us are going to be employed, relatively few of us, I don't have an answer for the other bit. When I know that some countries are experimenting with universal human income, so basic income, and the results of that are mixed. And there are arguments from conservative commentators here in Australia that, how we're going to fund that sort of thing. And it's a super wicked problem. So essentially, it's too complex, and so we're putting it off until it becomes a crisis. And maybe we can crowdsource the solution. Yeah.
So I might just I know Roger's been looking to have a question there, so I'll finish with you, Roger. No pressure.
Oh, thanks. I was really interested, and a lot of us are in this transdisciplinary approach, particularly those who aren't quite tall enough to be elite. And so I guess my question is, has there been any work looking at elite teams or particularly successful teams? And what are the criteria or the elements that make them successful? Is it the breadth of the transdisciplinary of the disciplines, or is it some of the personality that are able to work together? So I'm just interested if there's research in the transdisciplinary performance.
It's from my experience and from my reading, it's actually both. It's both. So you've got to have that balance, that jigsaw that I was alluding to just before, of skill sets, the right kind of depth in the right kinds of places, and the breadth to be able to tap in. And also the personality and the other team dynamic elements to make things work. So you've got to have your driver, you've got to have your risk manager and your resilient type person, you've got to have your the person who drives things through and so forth. And your conventional sort of team organisation type stuff really covers up on that. But you need both, and it becomes even more complex than it already is. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Ruth. So I know a few of you have got some extra questions, so I encourage you to hang around for the drinks later on. But in the meantime, I'll ask my colleague Marek. Marek Kowalkiewicz leads one of the themes in the Institute on embracing the digital age. So Marek's going to give the vote of thanks from all of us.
Thank you so much. I'll try to be quick and brief. My name is Marek Kowalkiewicz. I'm a professor at QUT's Institute for Future Environments. The research theme is called Embracing Digital Age. Note the embracing. We're called Embracing Digital Age, not denying digital age or avoiding or defending from the digital age. So we have this very, very positive spin on things. And Ruth, thank you for leaving us on the positive note. I guess, when you started, I was a bit worried with jobs disappearing, but we see where we could be going. And sometimes when I think about what's happening with all the robots and algorithms, they're a bit like awkward teenagers these days. So they're a bit lost. They make a lot of mistakes. They actually need our help. So I'm very excited about those new jobs that will appear. Fashion designers for Android robots, right? Think about it. We'll need those, right? Managers of algorithms. There are calls for stopping the usage of artificial intelligence in courts because we cannot really explain what's happening there, right? So people will have to manage that. Teachers of robots, could someone please teach my brat to fold towels, right? So maybe there will be schools of robots where I will be sending my androids. And, when something goes wrong between me and my robot, maybe I'll need robot relationship counselors as well. And I'm very serious about it. I am. I definitely mean it. I think there will be a lot of new jobs we cannot yet imagine what they are, and part of our job is to try to do that. So I love the concept of key-shaped people. What I'm going to, or what I keep telling my children, both are 7 years old, I have twins, that they shouldn't be training for a job that may or may not exist when they graduate from schools. They should be focusing on skills that will make them employable in all sorts of jobs, so that the key-shaped aspect is there. And my son is telling me that he wants to be a robot police professor right now, so he's coming up with jobs right now as well. So maybe it's not a race against the machine, maybe it's a race with the machine. It's all up to us, and we get to shape that. So Ruth, thank you so much for your presentation. It's been very inspiring for all of us. Ruth will be leaving QUT in June to enjoy South Australia and pursue new adventures over there at the University of South Australia. She's going to be an academic dean in their Division of Education, Arts and Social Sciences, as well as professor of teaching and learning. So congratulations, Ruth, on this one. And we thought it's appropriate to let you experience the spirit of South Australia. So here's how you can start. All right.
Thank you, Marek.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the entire, yes, it is South Australia. On behalf of the entire IFE Institute for Future Environments team, I would like to thank all of you for joining. Also those who joined us online. Thank you, Ruth's mom, for joining. I know my mom joined as well. Thank you, Mom. And I would like to invite you to drinks and nibbles upstairs on level 6. You can either go upstairs or take a lift/elevator inside the building. It's level 6. Thank you very much for coming.